It's the end of the day, but I wanted to say that we're doing pretty great with what's coming our way with Cascadia. Yeah, it's gonna be great. So that's what we're doing anyway, and I'm happy to say that it's one of my favorite things. So I'm gonna keep working on it and see where it leads. And we've been putting a few more micro patches on, update the website, and I just want to make sure that when it's finally used, it's just right. Because I'll tell you what, it's one of the few things that when I get it done makes me feel just right. So it helps me sleep at night, and it's pretty great. So that's what we've been doing. I saw Clifford today. He's my partner in this Cascadia plan thing that we're doing together, and I mentioned to him that we're trying to get in each state, like a compartment of people, about 5 people who will throw local like get-togethers, and there will be 1 or 2 at a time in each area of the state that will then organize in favor of the Cascadia plan. And I'm not trying to boast, but I wrote it because there is no other plan, man, and you gotta have a plan. Now, some people in Cascadia believe that the secessionists and the independence movement of Cascadia will break up the movement and ultimately is just like a radical perspective, or that statists want to take it over. But in order to get true independence, we would not have statism as much as we would have a system of natural law, pretty much, or as close to it as we can with the civil laws. And, I think it's the most practical way to make this happen. If we are recognized under the Montevideo Convention as being our own nation, it doesn't even matter if the rest of the United States acknowledges it, we would be de facto our own nation. There's all these things that can be done if we're smart about it. So the reason I wanted to talk to you is that we had a pretty productive day. I let him know about wanting to publish the book of the Cascadia Plan, which is Project 2028. And he talked to me about how one of the most important things we can do is get awareness to the project and get people on board. And that we need to, have an event. So one of those things could be a Cascadia Day. And I haven't quite decided what day to set that at. But it seems to me that it could be practical to put it in the life cycle of like a Douglas fir, or something like that, right? Because if we do such a thing, then we have a concrete type of deadline we can set it at. Maybe like the average number of days after the beginning of spring for when the Douglas fir starts to produce pollen or something, right? As an example, that's one thing we could set it to do for the day of Cascadia Day. Oh, what I'd like to say is Cascadia Day is like a future version of the 4th of July for Cascadia. It's all about our independence. And Cascadia Day is also about the area we live in here in the Pacific Northwest. So we need an identity of like rugged individualism, but also like socially libertarian or progressively libertarian. And so like we have autonomy and our sovereignty are being a major emphasis, and then we also have like community assistance mutual aid projects. And then what I'd really like to see done is get a spot at the state fair to do a Cascadia booth once a year. And that's hypothetically possible. But for now, we need to get funds. So the book publishing and making license plates that are based on the Uniform Commercial Code for sovereignty, and making other books that are easier to generate with AI to make it so we can try to get a stream of income without needing to spend 6 months writing a book or something. Because we do want to have a high quality product, but we also want to make sure that it's not destroying all of our free time working on small little tasks that might not even lead necessarily to anywhere. So like a word puzzle book. Also in the scope of the field of things that can be a mix between AI producing bulk content and then me doing specific manual labor for making it best would be like an identification book of the wild edible plants and fungi of the Pacific Northwest, which I'm sure there's already a book like that. Then we can do Amazon affiliate links and hook it up to a website. And there are other ideas like resource provisions. Like we could theoretically get web hosting that's actually in like Portland, and we could, or even host it here in Eugene, and then have a VPN and then call it like Cascadia Link VPN or whatever. And those are just examples. The branding of Cascadia is getting more loose of an idea. And yeah, VPNs are good for getting around digital surveillance and censorship, but we do want to try to keep it more based directly on things that are cascadian. So, it's a little complicated in order to make it so that we'd be able to produce consistent income to fund the project. But that is the goal without having it only be donations. Like, donations are good, but we don't want to solely rely on that. We need to have a business that generates money. And then we're also thinking about possibly some lawsuits, class action lawsuits, that we would get some money from that and be able to put it into Cascadia. And then I'm trying to figure out if there's a way I can finagle the statute of liability saying that I'm still suffering injury from the initial wrong. And so my interest is continually existing and is not moot, but is a continual injury I continue to suffer, and then sue for the purpose of that. And the difficulty is that I don't have money, neither does my buddy, to get like a lawyer. So we need people to also volunteer. If you're a skilled paralegal, or if you're a lawyer, or if you have like political activism, organizational skills, you should definitely get a hold of me. The email for that is cascadiaplan on Gmail. And if you're smart enough, you'll know what to do with that. And the Cascadia plan is the only plan I've heard of for it. In fact, there's not really even a real plan for what's supposed to happen in the next American Revolution. And Cascadia could be a model for the rest of the world for where to take that. So I think that's what we need to be aiming at to make it happen. Because we're going to run out of time fighting against Agenda 2030. And by 2045, their plan is to exterminate. And we don't want that to happen because we're conservationists of life. And we're like pro-choice to a degree until there's interest to someone else, like a child, and having their development not be impaired or impacted. And like then when they're viable outside the womb, they get full human personhood rights, pretty much. And that's like thing. And we're just talking about abortion for a second because I got a little off topic. But all I'm trying to say, I guess, is that we need to get more people on board in Cascadia, and we need to have a viable income model. And we need to get organized and get events going. And there already was the shot that they shot first when they shot at me, which, I mean, I think you can pretty much tell that's not how an arm is supposed to look, but that's how mine looks. And it's fucked up, but I'm still here anyway, so that's better than being dead. But I really believe if we can make Cascadia happen, then the world will be a better place. So, how about you fight with me together? We can live in a world where, oh, there we go, nice and bright. We can live in a world where we can rely on the fact the government has no legitimate capacity to intervene, nor would they attempt to impose such a capacity, even if it's illegitimate. Well, there are cases where the government can intervene in the violation of rights. As far as I think, that really is self-regulating in the natural law sense, which is what we exposed. We expanded the definitions in the Constitution of Cascadia. So if you go to cascadiaplan.wordpress.com, you'll actually be able to find that work. Then there's the Cascadian Law and Justice.wordpress.com that has the cases we're talking about, and also my defense for carrying my knife and my pepper spray and eventually a taser. What we'll hope to do is build such a strong defense that we can actually tear down the so-called historical prohibitions on felons to keep and bear arms with a completely custom-tailored legal argument. Yes, I'm probably going to cheat a little bit and use AI to help me with background research, but the reason I've been using it so much is because I paid for it and I wanted to get some actual useful outputs from it before it shuts down. My next plan, I think it's called Poe, P-O-E .ai. I think it's Poe. And it can aggregate from a whole bunch of AI projects at once and then let you choose what output you want to use for each thing. And I think it lets you reuse your prompt between them too and output it in a clean format. So that's a smart idea. But AI being used in a political project is not necessarily the smartest idea. And what I think that its main utility is for reminding you of things that you might be missing or prompting you about ideas that you could find useful to integrate. It's not a tool itself to replace the human labor aspect of the actual lawmaking, although I'm guilty of explicitly programming it to make a constitutional amendment and then using that instead of wanting to take the time to write it by hand. Not because I can't, not because I fail to, but because my job has been so tedious after 14 years of doing it that I really just kind of want to get this done as quick as possible. It's already been 14 years. That's not a short period of time in the scope of how long things can exist. And 14 years is enough time to know the strengths and the weaknesses of a project. And I can say one of its weaknesses is how the all-encompassing scope of that Constitution tries to cover as many things pre-deciding them so that there'll be uniform outcome and we can rely upon the standards that we'll all live under without leaving things to question under the sort of whimsical or even capricious wills of rulers in the future. My main job was to make a libertarian axis-oriented democratic republic that had some sort of social welfare programs and ecological stewardship and an emphasis on holistic and natural medical and also clean food and water. Those would be the main balancing principles: legalizing drugs and having strong firearm protections of rights, and even more absolute in a sliding scale between deprivation itself and absolute right with no infringement. We have pretty much the no infringement absolute right side of it down. I would say shall not be infringed. Basically, it ensures an absolutism to that right. It cannot be disparaged. But that's happened regardless. So I think we need some safeguards added to our current political system. In fact, it should not be our current political system anymore. It should be replaced entirely by a better and improved beyond anything that's ever been done in the scope of human history for political sciences, as far as we know, unless Atlantis had it, or like, what was that place called? Tardaria? I don't know, man. But the point really comes down to this. If you're interested in Cascadia, you're welcome to get a hold of me, Alexander Konoff. I call myself Ghost Liberty. And the reason for that is because I'm all that's left over after tyranny takes foot. That's left is the Ghost Liberty, but also it's the spirit that calls you and guides you. And it can't be destroyed. Unlike the body, the spirit remains, and that liberty, that freedom, is the highest aim a society should go for. I think prosperity and thriving people who have absolute freedom, and then if you also have a lot of positive outcomes and people are not starving, and mutual aid is commonly occurring for those who have a need to exchange or for voluntary consensual basis, you have the best possible society. Think about what would even be better philosophically, like a religious state that you think means perfect moral and ethical purity. What if you kept it secular, but you still had an assurance of a moral outcome and an ethical well-being or an ethical truth to others, for others, and around and interacting with others? That's what you get with civil government, and Cascadia's plan is a civil government. So, I'm going to run out of battery soon. Give me a second to try to check this. I got 7%, so we got a little bit of time. But I started this video mainly because I wanted to kind of catalog what we've been going through with the day as far as the Cascadia plan goes and meet with Clifford. And then I wanted to elaborate a little bit on the actual plan itself, which is the most thorough and comprehensive plan ever conceived in human history for what I would call civil governance in the style of John Locke. Jeffersonianism, Lockeanism, Spoonerism, and some Madisonian element to integrating all that. And James Madison is to thank for lots of things that happened with the Constitution. So I think the time has come. And it could be a glorious revolution, or it could be crimson, or you could say maroon, or the color of something. It's not a flood. It starts with a B instead of an E or a G in between this thing, you see. So, yeah. The point being, if we can make this happen, we have what I would say an assurance or a guarantee for the best possible world. Should Cascadia break away? I think as a model to the rest of the world, that's the only way to guarantee it will work. Because you can still do Cascadian bioregionalism inside of the Cascadia's nation state. Because there will be different watersheds and different mountain ranges and stuff that can all be incorporated in that. Valleys and shit. What I do believe is we should be focusing more on a national instead of only in Cascadia for the plan, and that was called Green Haven, which is the same constitution but with the name changed. Then I talked about making decentralized autonomous organizations and trying to federate them so that you would like federate individual properties to create communities and then like neighborhoods and stuff like that. But the real point of this conversation is that if we can break away, and if we can guarantee this outcome, that our anxieties can go away. Because we'll still have our regular day-to-day life to deal with, working and cleaning and a lot of other things involved. I'm just kind of going to keep it working and cleaning because you cook and you organize. You got time you spend with your kids. You might play some games here and there. But, I'm not going to go in every aspect of detail of a possible day. Just going to say that if you are thinking it really depends on who's in office, whether or not you're living in a good country and that you're free, then your country can't be that good and you're clearly not that free. If it is such a worry about who's in office and who's executing the powers of government at any given time, then your system is not a reliable system. It is tumultuous, and because you can't have an outcome that you're certain about in that system, and it doesn't stay uniform over time, and it can change on a whim, and it's up to the opinion of another instead of a material fact or something, you are going to be in a bad way. Also, more and more people have been talking about eventually everyone's going to become homeless, and they're not going to have what they really need, and then the churches will be overrun with people trying to get food, and there won't be enough to go around, and so it's going to get worse. To stop that, we need to have a prosperity boosting going on, and homesteading, and Cascadia will get rid of taxes. It'll keep people from going to prison and having their life torn apart because of the capricious and arbitrary laws that are in the United States. And you can think about it for yourself. Political instruments can't solve everything, and we need to have societal change more than political change. But this political document can actually, kind of through the cult of personality and people who are nationalistic about the identity of the nation, not necessarily in the standard American statist pro-authoritarian way, but if they're nationalistic in that they think about a national identity and national politics and stuff, and what does it mean to be an American, it would be an example, or that we have a constitution, or that you're a citizen, and what are United States, and all this kind of shit that really kind of usually goes over people's heads and never even gets thought about because they've underseen it, they undersight. In their mind, it's not an important detail to even look into. But I'm saying, once we get enough people on board and the conversations are happening, we ask ourselves, if we were going to have a revolution, what's the plan? Or for Cascadia, what's the plan to make it happen, huh? What do you think? Should we just rely on the current status quo and then use local and community bioregional based self-organization and government, where we try to get people in office who cooperate on goals and use the existing system? Or do you believe the existing system is already broken, already doesn't work, taxes are already unjust and shall not be infringed? It goes from a jury rights, it goes from a speech, it goes from our religion, it goes from a guns. Shall not be infringed goes for any right. And if it shall not be infringed, then it's only something along the lines of the equal balancing interests that a right could ever be considered to be violated, and therefore your own rights would be at stake as to you would lose your freedom temporarily as you repay your debt to society or other form of punishment. But pretty much what we're getting at is, do we live in a system where that's hard-coded, or do we live in a system where it's implied, because implied doesn't work very well. When things are really up in the air like that, you should not feel safe and sound and happy and satisfied with where you live. So check out Cascadia plan. I just hope it's not a fucking bobcat I'm hearing, because it will fuck me up bad. Yeah, out here. Out in these boons. Out in them boonies. So, I want you to think about where we're at in this country and what do you really think will change it. Eminent domain is a violation of rights. Taxation. And the violation of the bias rule, the Supreme Court is the ruler in its own case. Those are the three off the top of my head, but there's 9 of them I remember doing. About the Constitution of the United States as it stood, with the Bill of Rights even. And I think once you're willing to judge critically where we're at, and once you've read the Constitution and tried to see it for its faults, and understood the language and not just read it and say in English it makes sense, but like you understand what operational parameters of law are, and you understand what the operational parameters of natural law versus the civil law, and you understand the difference between edicts and enumerations of rights. Like, when you are able to truly grasp it politically, then you are the reason why an Athenian would have been held in high esteem. Because Athenians were supposed to be a demos that were well educated, that they would then be able to rule themselves instead of require representatives to do their jobs for them. That is kind of where we're at. If you can be an educated individual, you're going to be much better off and trustworthy to make these decisions. Do you have the right to vote or the power to vote? I believe you have the power to vote, and that the power comes through the contract, the civil instrument, and that you have the right to form that instrument and to consent or to not consent to an instrument. And so that's where we're at with what I'm talking about there. So you need to be an educated enough person that you understand how government operates in order to be trusted to vote in it or to serve in a jury. Right? Does that make reasonable sense? If your IQ is below 100, why should we trust you to vote? You're below average intelligence. And we need the average person or better than the average person to be able to make these choices, right? So I'm a meritocrat. And there are international standard tests. And if you really want, you could fix a test to a certain year. And that they must pass a score of at least this much from a test of that year if you're worried about some sort of like creep that might modify the test to make it impossible for certain reasons for certain people or whatever the fuck. I just believe that at this point we have gotten to where we have to improve our system. We can't trust this old, outdated document of the United States Constitution. It is not perfect and was not actually originally designed to protect your rights at all. You had no ex post facto law, and you had habeas corpus. And that was as close to you got to having enumerations of rights, in that other than shall not be deprived of equal rights and immunities as those of the several states. Or is it privileges and immunities? Shall not be deprived of equal privileges and immunities as those in several states. And those 3 really cover you for your rights under the original Constitution. It was not intended as a protective document for your rights. It was just supposed to be a government that didn't intervene in your rights, because the original document, except for cases in like taxation, didn't directly intervene in the lives of the people. And that's why it was considered to be minarchist, or at least non-interventionist. Well, we're getting better than that. Do you really think a 250-year-old document could not be improved? Because they did put an amendment power in there for a reason. It has been amended. That's all my work is. Amass amendment and restructuring, reorganizing of the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I hear someone. It's the pigs. So, this video exists to gain awareness about Cascadia and the purpose of the project, and to try to get you to question where we're at right now. Do you want to fix it? Because there are people who think this is going to work. And there are people who think this is as good as it can get. And there are people who agree there needs to be a plan for what comes next in the United States. We cannot just allow this on autopilot to coast off of the edge of the cliff where it's going. Everybody recognizes that there's an issue in the Americas right now, and it's not just going to be all fine. And what happens if we default on our debts and everything gets foreclosed? Are we going to be invaded by a foreign force? We're already having things like that going on with a replacement population that does not have an ethnic American belief. Right? An ethnic American is Americana, the Bill of Rights, the Anti-Federalist Papers, revolution against tyrannical government, bearing arms, freedom of speech, jury trial, fair trial, common law. Like, that's Americanist principles. And if you're not an ethnic American, you don't deserve to be in this country. But if you came in illegally and you're not willing to integrate, then you should go right the fuck back home. It's not even controversial. That's one of the least things the government could do. How is that even viewed as tyrannical? It's kind of hilarious. But we are progressive libertarians, and I consider myself a true liberal. That's what makes me wonder, what are the Democrats really even going on about? Like, they're not even real Democrats. They're not all voting to their representative, and their representative follows the collective will of the people. That'd be democracy, or a Democratic representative. They're not Republican representatives in office either, because they don't consult with their masses for their common public good, and then make the best choice based on their consultation with the masses. It's all about platform. You vote for a party. It's not about the purpose of true civil government. I fixed this shit, guys. Do you want it to happen? Do you want it? How badly would you